Terra, meu planeta azul, tu és tão brilhante.
I'm going to actually do something different. I hope these gentlemen won't mind, since I'm going to be talking about coalition building. One of the first parts of coalition building, see if I can do this, is to be a little innovative and to do something a little different. So one second. So I would say one of the first things, if we're talking about engaging civil society, is if we're behind these tables up on another level, we're not really together in the same playing field. So I hope you don't mind that I'm actually going to stand up and be on the same level with you as I present. One moment. So my name is Deporte, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Human Impacts Institute. I'm sorry I have my back to you, gentlemen. I'm here to tell you a little story about a coalition that we started called Mobilize Us. But before I get there, one of the key things that Miro had asked me to talk about is really how do we transform the UN system to really have civil society engaged. And I think one of the key points is that there's a lot of talking. There's so many ideas. The more people you put in the room, the more points of view and ideas you have. But how do we get past the discussion and really get to action, and particularly as a collective? So if you can go proximal. So I'm going to tell the little story of Mobilize Us. No? But again. So the Mobilize Us coalition, we started, it really started about a year and a half ago, where I was at a meeting of preparation for Rio+20, and it was a group of North Americans. It was US and Canadian groups. We had a wonderful partner group called We Canada that stood up, and have any of you heard of We Canada Coalition? A couple of people. The group of civil societies from Canada, they came up and they showed us how much they were doing to really engage civil society in their country. Did a beautiful presentation to a bunch of delegates and everything. And then we waited, as an American, as someone based in New York City, we waited for the US presentation. And there wasn't one. There wasn't one that came. There wasn't another group that was building a coalition and bringing people together. So even though we're a small organization, we decided, well, if no one else is willing to try to do coalition building around Rio+20 for this, we're willing to start it. So some of the key goals of it was, we have to figure out what were our goals. And we said healthy communities, good governance, strong economy, and a healthy environment. You can see the language, it's the same as what Rio+20's goals are, but we decided to tweak the words a little bit so that people might be able to connect with it. Sustainable development in terms of civil society, a lot of people have no idea what that might mean. And I think that's also the same with a lot of people that are here at the Rio+20 conferences. How do we define that? So the next proximal photo. So I thought, since it's early in the morning, even guinea pigs can share, and we'd show that how are we going to do this in terms of coalition building, grassroots action. So actually on the ground, getting our hands dirty. Again, ideas to action. Advocacy, sharing resources, which is huge when it comes to civil society and civil society engagement. We don't have the billions of dollars that Mira was talking about, most of us. And in all coalition building beyond us. So proximal. So why did we choose Rio+20? One was, particularly in the US, we were seeing we are a leader. We are #1 in pollution. You pick almost anything, in consumption, in emissions, but we're not the leader in solutions. So how can we transform that? And also when we look at Rio and we look at actual policy making, the US is often not pushing things forward. We're not trying to raise the bar. So we wanted to do that. The next one, proximal. And one of the key things that Miro said is really, when you get a bunch of governments together, particularly in consensus, when you have to have consensus decision making, you tend to, someone might set the bar up here, but it tends to get lower and lower because everyone has to agree. But in our communities, we don't have that case. So we can truly see innovation can come from the ground, can come from the ideas of our youth, of our nonprofits, of many different groups. Proximal proposal. And the other thing was, I don't know, have any of you been involved in climate negotiations, Copenhagen, things like that? No. Well, you guys. So one of the things is we also wanted to, in terms of approaching coalitions, is we wanted to ensure a positive outcome from Rio+20. That no matter what our governments decide, and we're certainly going to push them to decide something important, but no matter what happens here, we are going to be implementing these ideas in our communities. So we want to ensure that action happens no matter what. And if it doesn't happen on an international level, then we're going to go back to the US, for instance, and make sure it happens on the local level, on the regional level, on our national level. So that was another reason. And the last one is really trying to repair a movement in a lot of ways. In Rio in '92, so much exciting things happened. But particularly in civil society, there's been so much movement, so much excitement, so much innovation, but there hasn't been a lot of movement in the government side of things. So how do we repair that and get people to want to be engaged and involved? And now I'm going to just show you a couple of examples. So first, kind of coalition building 101. We started this and we've learned a lot. The first is choose your friends. So know who you like to partner with, and who has interesting approaches to similar issues. You don't all want to necessarily agree, but can challenge each other. But also know your enemies. Know what are the groups you don't want in your coalition and why. The second is making it personal, and I think this is true for any of these issues. How do we take an issue like sustainable development, poverty alleviation, and actually make it count and be about your community, your life, your children? Because all in all, no matter whether you're a delegate or an NGO representative, we take action when it really matters to us. And the last one is, of course, again, ending in action. So also, I think I already said this, but pulling resources together, but keeping your goals and targets in mind. It's very hard when you build coalitions, particularly with the diversity of civil society, to branch off in many different directions. So being able to pull it back in is very important, and you don't have to do everything. So the last part, and I think this is actually most important, is you have to know who you're speaking to. When we set up the Mobilize Us Coalition, we realized we have to look at the political climate of the US. We have to look at kind of the general approach to sustainability in the US and what language is going to speak to people so that they really want to embrace it. So if we say sustainable development in the context of blah, 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 a lot of people, particularly in the US, I mean, we have a movement building that's totally against Agenda 21. It says that it's, the worst thing ever invented, and it's ruining our lives. So how do we engage people that have that discussion and don't necessarily have the policy background, don't have the background information? And so that's really about how do you message. And so I just want to really quickly just show you some of our coalition partners include these guys up here. We have the Sounding Board, which is a group that was working with Miro, the Earth Charter Initiative we've been working with, Global Kids, Earth Day Network, NRDC, many different groups. And just some key resources in terms of how do we engage people. One of the ideas we had is, this actually worked a lot for the Obama administration to get elected this first term, was to have house parties, to give people a way to talk about Rio+20, to show a little video to their friends, to cook a sustainable meal, and have a discussion. Perhaps for the first time, have a discussion about poverty alleviation, or have a discussion about how would we address water quality issues? And so to get people to start talking in their communities. So we created a little guide to having a party about Rio+20 in your house. Lesson plans, so getting lessons into the classrooms we found was very important. And I wanted to show you, this is a less than 2-minute video. This is actually, so I'll just tell you what this was. Basically, one of the key issues that came out of our coalition members that really resonated was ending fossil fuel subsidies. And if there's one thing that we try to get out of Rio, that we would push for that. So as our organization, Human Impacts Institute, we hit the streets with video cameras. We had kids go and interview other people around New York City, people that had no idea what Rio+20 was, never heard of these issues, and said, what would you do with $775 billion of taxpayers' money? That's what we asked them. What would you do? And what do you think they said? You said buy houses for everyone? No, they said education. That was huge. People said education, taxpayers' money, education, hospitals. I would eliminate poverty. I would do these, and these are people just walking around the street. They're from kids to older. So, and then at the end of it, we said, well, what we're doing now with it is we're subsidizing fossil fuel industry. And that little discussion, it took 30 seconds with each person. It got them thinking, and a lot of them, it got them angry, and it got them wanting to be engaged in the issue. So that's one example of something we do. And of course, we have monthly phone calls with all of our coalition members. I think that's very important if you want to engage civil society. That's not one action, but you've got to really build relationships. And we've also had quite a few events. I don't think I need to go into them, but one of them was having an actual citizen summit where we bring people together to discuss these issues of Rio+20, as well as the New York+20, which is part of the My City +20 movement, where they had, brought Rio to your city. For not everyone can come to Rio, as lucky as us. I'm almost here. And one other thing, I think, is when we come to education, and particularly civil society, we're talking about a lot of groups and a lot of individuals that don't have a lot of resources or time, and maybe don't have the same access to different knowledge systems. So one idea in terms of education was, how can we bring the education to the people? So how can we have little trainings on using social media at a farmer's market? How can we have a little activism training at a stop on the side of the road where a lot of people are bus stopped? How can we bring education to people as opposed to them having to come to us and use their resources to engage? And I think, almost done. Really the outcome is, I think we've had really effective engagement, particularly in the US, but we've had a lot of groups outside of the US that say, wait a minute, I care what's happening in the US because it's impacting the rest of the world, and it's impacting the outcomes of Rio+20 proximal. And just in terms of lessons learned, one thing in terms of coalition building, I think particularly working with many great NGOs, is it's hard to leave what I call the organizational ego at the door. And this might be true in individuals as well, but in order to truly build a movement and to work together, in my opinion, we need to keep our missions in focus. What's our end goal? And how we get there? We can decide together, but if we keep our end goal in mind, that way we can really get a lot done. And the last thing, I'm going to kind of challenge you with this, in terms of Rio+20 connecting it. So we have the major group structure, which in so many ways is a great access point for civil society to be a part of this process. But at the same time, I don't know how many of you have heard of separate but equal during the civil rights movement in the US, is that we're separated out of the process in a lot of ways as civil society as well. And I'd like to challenge you, I don't know the answer to this, but is it anti-movement building to have to decide whether I'm a youth, whether I'm a scientist, whether I'm an NGO, whether I represent education? Or is there another way that we can be innovative as civil society in order to really access and to move our delegations to take action? So I think I'll end there, and thank you so much for your time.
Giras em torno do sol num passo constante. O teu